Pirates of Penzance was the second Gilbert Sullivan operetta that I ever sang. I had done Sir Joseph Porter and HMS Pinafore, and the following season I sang The Pirate King. This was an awfully long time ago. It was in 1973, 72 or 73. It's my favorite Gilbert Sullivan operetta, and it is the one that I certainly sang the most over the years. Oddly enough, I've never directed this piece, so I am especially thrilled to be doing Pirates and doing it for the Savoyards. It was probably 2007. It was Cox and Box and the Sorcerer, and then I had done the Gondoliers before that. So I'm especially thrilled to be doing my favorite. I discovered Gilbert and Sullivan when I was in high school through these wonderful recordings on Angel EMI of Sir Malcolm Sargent, the Glyndebourne Festival Chorus, Elsie Morrison, Monica Sinclair, Richard Lewis. And so I listened to all of them. But I do remember there was something about the music of Pirates that grabbed me from the very start, and I feel, not to diminish the music in the other great operettas, but for me, it sustains this incredible high quality from the very first note all the way through to the end. It is a little different for me from the other pieces. It isn't quite such a biting political indictment of society, quite like the Mikado. It has a lot of charm and certainly more than a healthy dose of the usual topsy-turvy, but there's something about the characters. Say the sergeant of police. Well, there is certainly a comparable man in uniform in Iolanthe, the Private Willis. This is a more fully developed character, and one like Private Willis we don't see until Act 2. And his solo may be my favorite thing in the whole operetta. Another thing that Pirates has that I found is a lot of, it may not appear to be so at first hearing, but for me it has sort of send-ups of classical opera, which you see in other pieces, but there is a great scene in Act 2, which to me is very evocative of romantic ballet of the 19th century. It is the Major General solo with the pirates and the police chorus just before the finale. And I think we're going to have an awful lot of fun with that. And actually, I know we're going to have a lot of fun with that. As usual, when I bring these things up at production meetings, everybody looks at me like I've lost my mind, and these are people that I've worked with for years, but there you have it. Well, the one thing I will say about Pirates is it's always part of the, you know, the top three: Pinafore, Pirates, and Mikado. I don't know whether those statistics hold up around the world, but they certainly do in this country. Pirates has always been possible because, certainly for opera companies, it's more easily done to include in the repertoire because you can do it with really first-rate opera singers. The Pirate King, Mabel, Frederick, and Ruth to a certain extent. In fact, the Lyric Opera of Chicago some seasons ago did a production of the Pirates of Penzance. And back 30 odd years ago, New York City Opera had summer seasons in which they did operetta. And they did the Mikado and Pirates. I'm not sure whether they did Pinafore. They also did like Naughty Marietta and Vagabond King and most things, Lumberg Frimmel and that. But Pirates is the one that is often done by opera companies. And oftentimes, if theater companies do it, they try to make it into some sort of Broadway musical, which it isn't. I saw the famous Joseph Papp production of the Pirates, which was later filmed, when it was done in Central Park, which had its charm, but what was lacking in two of the principals were a classically trained voice. It just didn't have the same impact that the music would with the right kind of singer for those parts. Although I did love that production, I must say. But I mean, any political and social barbs they had are as apt today as they were then. I don't really find that in this piece, except, you know, what we oftentimes think of security people who may not be the best at their job, which the sergeant and his police force is entertaining as they can be. It doesn't appear like they're going to get the job done, but of course they end up thwarting the pirates just before the end for the briefest of time, you know, shall we say. We don't want to spoil the ending. This one, although I think certain GNS does time travel well, both Jonathan Miller and Peter Sellers had wildly successful updatings of the Mikado. One of the best productions of Patience I ever saw was actually in the 1960s, set in the 1960s, and it was absolutely brilliant. This one, I don't think time travels so well. It needs to be some sort of, you know, quasi-period. That doesn't mean you can't do different kinds of things with the direction that might have a little bit more of a contemporary slant. All of my work, whether it's operetta or opera, is always grounded in tradition. I'm sure that most people hearing this who know me won't believe that for a minute, but it is honestly the truth. I think that everybody has to ground their art in what has come before and what people have done. If you do know that, and you start with that, it frees you in all kinds of ways to adapt it and do other things. Some people may not agree with what you've done with it, but I always start with that. I always start with that. It makes me better. Just remind myself. It's like going back to a basic technique. If you're an athlete or a singer or a ballet dancer, you do the same things at the beginning of a ballet class that you did when you were 6 years old as you do when you're 40 if you're still able to dance. And I think artists need to do that too. Most of the Gilbert Sullivan pieces have the usual lineup. You know, the contralto, the soprano, a baritone, a character baritone, and a tenor. Some have, you know, 2 tenor parts, you know, or there were more men in Utopia last summer in characters in that than I think all the other GNSs combined. But it depends on who's singing it, what they look like, and what are their best qualities to bring out within the character and the realization of the drama. That's always the fun, because while the score and the words are exactly the same, it can never be exactly the same in execution, because it's not always done by the same person. Yes, I'm very honored to be included in this 50th anniversary celebration, and I keep thinking what I was doing 50 years ago. I was 14, and I started working in opera on a full-time basis when I was 15. And the Gilbert and Sullivan came, I think, about 10 years later. I was 24, I believe, or 25 when I did my first GNS. And I have been involved. I did Gilbert and Sullivan for a very large part of the middle of my life and career, from the time I was 25 for about 12 or 15 years. And then I didn't come back to it for an awfully long time. I didn't come back to it until 2001, I think, when I directed and choreographed the Mikado for the Kansas City Lyric Opera. And since then, I've done, this will be 3 productions for the Savoyards. Here at UW, in the opera scenes program we did a few weeks ago, we actually did a scene from Act 2 of Pirates, sort of as a previews of coming attractions for the Savoyards production. 50 years is a huge milestone. I know myself from a lot of performing arts organization, you do it, it's successful, and then, well, why don't we do it the next year? And, well, let's try it one more time. And nobody ever knows how long they're going to exist. And then all of a sudden you land on 5-0, and it's like, well, good heavens, we must be doing something right if we've been going this long. And then it's always great to turn around and look back to see what you've done and who did it. Who did it? You know, that's always fascinating, because I've noticed with the Savoyards and really first-rate performing arts organizations, the people who no longer perform give back in so many ways. It's a huge history, and it keeps getting passed down literally through the generations, which I find absolutely fascinating. I mean, we now have cast members who have their children on stage with them, which I think is wonderful. I love working, unlike most directors, I love working with children. And in this production, we have 4 sensational young ladies who will have many very interesting things to do, so they'll have a good time. Adam Shelton, who is finishing his DMA here at UW, who's a tenor who's singing Frederick, has performed, you know, with the Knoxville Opera, the Des Moines Metro Opera, you know, and we'll be singing with the Madison Opera next season. You know, it's an interesting range of people. I have worked with some of the cast members before. Some of them will be brand new to me, which is always interesting. You know, it's always good to work with people you've worked with before. You tend to know already up front what their strong points are, but then you also have to find out what the new people are doing and see what the dynamic is with them. The musical rehearsals start on Sunday, I believe it's Sunday, June 10th, and my first rehearsal with the company is Wednesday, which I think is June 13th. So it will be here, well, soon. I learned this a long, long time ago from my mentor in graduate school. I studied opera with the great Walter de Clue, and I remember something he used to say to the young directors. If he didn't like maybe what he was seeing, you just had to fill in the composer's name, whether it was Puccini or something. He would always look at us and he would say, you know, Mozart doesn't need your help. Well, Gilbert Sullivan doesn't need my help. You have to have a vision and lead the piece, but you have to trust the composer and the librettist of any work you have. And there's none better than Gilbert Sullivan. You know, that's what sustains you. And those men make my job infinitely easier.